Thank you for checking out Coastal Community Church. We hope that you receive hope and encouragement through this week's message. If this ministry has impacted your life in any way, please share your story at mystory@coastalcommunity.tv. We hope you enjoy the service.
Well, good morning, Pompano. How you guys doing this morning? Fantastic. 11:50 service. You're actually my favorite service because you're the hardcore people that really love Jesus and love sleep. So we're glad that you're here today. We're in this series called The Habits of Happiness, and we kind of pulled a bait and switch on you because I said, man, how many of you guys, you're looking for the secret and find out all the things to make you happy? And everybody's like, yeah. And I was like, there is none. And you're like, no. So, but we've been talking about the fact that, man, there aren't any habits to happiness, but there is something that's much greater than happiness that we can have, and it's this idea of joy that God gives us that doesn't come from things, but comes from a person. And so we've been looking in the book of Philippians throughout this series. And if you want to turn to Philippians chapter 3, that's where we'll be hanging out today as we talk. If you didn't bring your Bible with you, that's okay. You can look in your worship guide. All the notes will be in there. If you didn't get a worship guide on your way in, then everything will be up on the screen. And as we get into that, Shayla and I, the woman that was just up here talking, that's my wife, Shayla. We've actually, yeah, she's awesome. I like her. I'm going to keep her for a little bit longer. Like the rest of my life, okay? I just feel like I don't want an email from somebody. We have known each other since we were 11 years old. And our families, they grew up together. They were really good friends. And so from the age of 11, I have been crushing on Shayla. Now, it was not reciprocated towards me for a very long time. We're talking like 8 or 9 years before there was any reciprocation of that crush. But I remember when we were little kids that, like, man, I just dreamed about taking Shayla, like Shayla being my girlfriend as a kid. You know, when you're younger, you're like, man, if that girl was just my girlfriend. And so I would dream about what our dates were going to look like. And I would write her love notes and send them to her in the mail, even though she's like, what is this dude doing? And finally, at about age 16, I finally got the guts up to ask Shayla out on a date. Now, the reason I finally got the guts up at 16 to ask Shayla out on a date was because at 16, there was this major life transformation that happened, and I'm not talking about puberty, but like what happened at 16 is my parents got me a car for my 16th birthday, and there is this amazing thing that happens to teenagers as far as the hotness level goes. If you have a car at 16, you are hotter than a hot guy that doesn't have a car. Like there's this like cool factor and it factor that goes up just by having a car. And so finally I had something going for me in life. And so I in my mind I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna ask Shayla out on this date. It's gonna be absolutely incredible. And I started making all these plans, and I said, man, I'm gonna ask her out on this date this weekend. It's gonna go great. Then I'm gonna ask her to go to this like formal dance thing that we're having the next weekend. And if everything goes right, I'm going to get a kiss. You know, like at 16, like your dream and your goal in life is to get kissed by a girl as a boy. Okay, so like that's what I'm thinking in my mind. I got this planned out. Like anybody else ever plan out their life like that? You're like, man, I got some ideas of what this is going to look like and what I want it to look like. And you're like, if everything goes right, man, I'm going to be on cloud nine, man. It's going to be awesome. And so I asked her out, and she goes, yeah, I'd go out with you. And so I took her out to eat. You know, we went to Applebee's. No shame in that game. 2 for $20. You know what I'm saying? Like economical. I'm a teenager. Cut me some slack. Y'all are still taking your girl to Applebee's, and you're 30. Okay, so cut it out. And so we go to Applebee's. That's great. And then we go to a movie. And the movie that we went to go see on our first date is the ultimate first date movie. Come on now. Like, we went to go see Dumb and Dumber the day it came out in theaters. I mean, like, it was like what, like, if you could set up the perfect date, Applebee's and Dumb and Dumber's. I mean, like, it doesn't get any better. We're sitting there in the movie theater. I'm looking over, and Shayla is cracking up, and I'm thinking, man, I got so much game. Like, I'm doing awesome. Like, she is digging me right now. Like, she's having the best date she's ever had. And we finished the movie. I mean, we're like rolling the entire time because that junk was just so funny. Heck, it's still funny today. And so we finish the movie, and I take her home, and as she's getting out of the car, I said, hey, next weekend we have this like kind of formal dance thing. Would you go with me? And she goes, yes. And so, man, I finished that date, and I am feeling like a pimp. I'm like, feeling like a pimp. Go and brush your shoulders off. Ladies as pimps too. Going, like, I'm just, like, I'm Jay-Z in it. Like, I just feel like I'm all, like, everything that I have been imagining is coming into place. And my happiness factor is like on 150 on a scale to 100. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm flying on cloud nine, and I'll think, man, that was so good. I better do it up. I better do it up. Like, I better look GQ smooth going to this formal dance. And so I went and I bought a suit at 16. Like, I wanted to make sure I looked fly. Like, when I showed up, it's like the cover of GQ, like, what? Like, I wanted there to be game there when she saw me. She'd be like, that dude is looking good. I borrowed my parents' BMW. So not only was I cool because I could drive, but now I drive a BMW. I got a suit on. I show up at her door, and she doesn't look happy. Got the corsage and everything, like, and like, she answers the door, and like, she isn't in as good of a mood as she was in the last date. And we get to the dance, and we're hanging out. I'm like, hey, do you want to dance? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, that's not a good sign for me. And we continue throughout the night. I'm like, can I get you a punch? Like, I'm just trying to do whatever I can. And so we end the night. I take her home, and you know what happens? I don't get a kiss. I get a slam door, and like, she walks off into her house, and I'm thinking, dang. What happened to all that game I had? And then the next day, like, I'm feeling pretty down, because my happiness is based on what's happening. And the next day, I'm thinking, man, I'm never going to get a phone call, and Shayla calls. And so all of a sudden, I'm getting some hope. Like, maybe it was just like some bad pizza or something that night. And she calls me up and says, TJ, I had a lot of fun at the movies, but I think we need to break up. And I actually think you should call up my friend Christina and ask her out on a date. And so Shayla just totally dogs me right there, and all of my hopes, all my dreams, all my aspirations in life were vanished, taken away. I didn't talk to her for like 3 years. That's how much I hated her. I'm just kidding. I really didn't talk to her for like 3 years. But like, have you ever noticed that your happiness and how you feel is based on what's happening around you? So many of us go through life and we live on this emotional roller coaster because of what's happening to us. And the thing that I love about God is that God didn't design us just to be based on what's happening to us. He gave us something so much greater that we could experience, that we could have in our life. And it's this thing called joy that doesn't come based on what's happening, but it comes based on a relationship with the personhood of Jesus Christ. And the thing that I absolutely knew and love about God is that God knew what he was doing when he created each and every one of us. Like, God knew that we were going to have some problems. We were going to have some deficiencies in life. And God knew that so much in advance that he designed our bodies to compensate for those deficiencies that are in our lives. Like, let me give you an example. My deficiency in life is that I'm bald. Okay, that's a deficiency. And so God compensated by that by making me good looking. So, like, that's the compensation. So all of you guys that have hair, so your deficiency is you're ugly, so he gave you hair, okay? So that's how I equate that. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's my assumption and theory there. So God is so intelligent that he knew that our bodies would need to compensate for things. And the amazing thing is science, as I was reading this week and as I was studying the brain and the functions of the brain, there's parts of your brain that they reach a point where they don't grow anymore, but there's also a part of your brain that has unlimited growth potential. And the amazing thing about this is this part of the brain is in the right orbital prefrontal cortex. I have no idea where that is, but I'm guessing it's in the right and it's in the front. And they say that that is actually the joy center of the brain. And the way that God designed our brains was with this section, that it never loses its capacity to grow. It never gets to a point where it says like it can't grow anymore, but it always has the ability to continue to grow and to continue to get better and bigger. And this fundamental section of your brain is what has executive control over your entire emotional system. And so what it basically means is that this center grows. It controls your emotional behavior. It controls how you feel in life when it comes to your health. It also controls your emotions. It controls pain control. It dictates all of these different things from this center, and it guides our bodies to act in certain ways. And so it can actually override our emotions, our pain centers, our health centers of our life. And I think that that's an incredible thing. That God, in the very beginning, as he was designing us and he was creating us, he would say things, for the joy of the Lord is your strength, because he knew that if we could strengthen and grow and build this area of our life, that it would be huge for us as we grow our joy centers. It would be a game changer, and it would help each and every one of us to enjoy our life, because he also knew that life would be difficult. Anybody experience some difficulties in their life? A couple of us, right? We've all experienced some difficulties, but yet in the midst of that, God says you can have joy. But the question is why is it that so many people lose their joy in life? They start off really good. They have all this vigor and all this zeal, and they're going well, but it seems like that joy that's in them starts to deflate a little bit, and before long, they're just kind of trudging through life, just kind of making it as they are, and there is no real joy in their life anymore. Like, how does that take place? And this book of Philippians that we've been studying, in case you haven't been here, this book was written by Paul to the church in Philippi, and he is encouraging them. In fact, over 16 times it says, have joy or rejoice or be glad, be happy. It says it over and over and over again in this book. And you would think that if Paul is speaking that way, that he must be in the most amazing situation. He must be like lying on the beach in the Caribbean on a cruise or something, and like writing a note to them, just encouraging them. But that's not the case at all. In fact, Paul is actually imprisoned at this point in Rome, chained to a Roman soldier for 2 years, awaiting his execution. And so how in the world does he have this uncommon joy in the midst of some amazingly difficult circumstances? And so he says this in verse 1. He says, finally, my brothers. Basically, he's in the middle of this note, and he says, hey, I'm about to wrap this up, but he's a typical preacher, so like he's not really about to wrap this up. He's got a whole another 2 chapters to write, but he's trying to give them some hope. He says, finally, my brothers, rejoice in the Lord. It is no trouble for me to write to you the same things again, and it is a safeguard for you. So he's saying, hey, listen, in conclusion here, I want to kind of summarize all of this stuff. Listen, and the things that I'm about to say is a safeguard for you. What I'm about to tell you is going to give you some guardrails, is going to give you some boundaries so that the joy that is in your life is not sucked out of your life. And listen, I'm going to be repetitive in this. He said, that's why he says, listen, it's not a problem for me to say the same things over and over and over and over and over again to you. And the reason why I'm saying it over and over and over is because you won't apply in your life what you don't remember. And so I'm going to keep saying it to you until you're like, man, I need to have joy. I need to rejoice. I'm going to keep telling you this over and over and over again until you get it. And not only do you get it, but you start applying it to your life. And so he says, hey, listen, I want you to watch out for a couple things. Here's the things I want to safeguard you from. And if you're taking notes, the first one is this. He says, man, I want you to safeguard yourself against negative people. Watch out for negative people in life. In verse 2, he says this, watch out for those dogs, those men who do evil, those mutilators of the flesh. And Paul right here is he's saying, listen, there are some people that are going to be out there that are going to walk up and they're going to have a lot of bark. They're going to instill a lot of fear. They're going to instill a lot of negativity in your life. They're going to do all of this stuff. Watch out for those people, because those people will steal and suck the joy right out of your life. Now, when I was a little kid, I happened to get kicked out of public school for beating up other kids. And because I beat up other kids, no school wanted to accept me. And so my parents ended up putting me in a private Christian school because, of course, a Christian school has to accept anybody, right? Because they're Christians. And so they gotta take the trouble kid in. And all the parents are like, oh, my kid goes to Christian school. I'm like, cool, your kid's hanging out with the worst kids, because that's where I got sent. And so I got sent to this Christian school. My parents weren't church people. We didn't know anything about God. We didn't have any relationship with God. And so I remember going to school and like a lot of this stuff was normal, like English and history and spelling and math. Like those were normal classes. But then we had like classes like Bible class, and I'd never opened up a Bible. I didn't even know what a Bible was. Like it was my first time experiencing any of that kind of stuff. And it was very, very different for me, because we would always start off with singing whenever we were going into Bible class time. And so it wasn't like the singing that we do up here. Like these people are happy, they're smiling, they're enjoying themselves, like they're full of life and energy. Well, my second grade teacher was this lady named Miss Kumpf. And Miss Kumpf, like I promise, if Satan and a demon had a child, her name was Miss Kumpf. And Miss Kumpf was like the meanest, grouchiest, angriest, bitterest person of all time. And so it makes total sense that she'd be teaching second grade at a Christian school, because that's where the meanest, bitterest, angriest people, most negative people in life are. And so in our Bible class, there would be a song that we would sing. Maybe you've heard it before, and it goes like this: I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. That's exactly what Miss Kumpf sounded like, I promise you. She like had this deep, growly voice, and she would go, well, I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. And all of us were sitting in our desks looking at her terrified. And how you sing this song is you'd go, where? And like, it wasn't like we weren't singing the song. We were actually asking where that joy, like, where is that? Like, and she'd go, I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. To stay. And we're like, man, if that's staying, I'm going. Like, I want nothing to do with this. And like, that was my first exposure to God. And I thought, man, if that's what God is all about, like, and if that's what joy is all about, like count me out. Why? Because she would suck the life out of every situation. She had this negative personality, and these negative influences that are in our lives, man, they rob us of our joy. And Paul is warning us against these people, because it seems like for negative people, it's like their mission to destroy your life. I don't know what it is. It's like their objective is to destroy you. And this is what I've just discovered in my own life, man. If you're negative around me, if you're that negative Nancy that hangs out, man, I'm going to drop you like it's hot. Man, I got enough negativity with 30 seconds on Facebook. I don't need a relationship in my life like that. Like, I just don't. And so Paul is warning us, because these are people who will derail your joy. That's why he says in Galatians chapter 5, verse 7, he says, you were running a good race. Like, hey, you had it going on. You were running this path and you had all this joy. He says, who cut in on you? Like, who's that person that was negative that came in your life and kept you from obeying the truth? Who's the person that's bringing all that negativity in your life? Man, hey, set up some guardrails, set up some parameters in your life to watch out for these type of people. He also says, man, we got to watch out for legalism. We got to watch out for legalism, because what happens for a lot of us is we find Christ, and the natural tendency for every single one of us is to get into this performance-based Christianity where it's all about, are we doing this, and this, and this, and getting all these checklists in our life. And what happens is when we start getting legalistic, it will always rob us of our joy. Because here's what happens. Legalism never sees Jesus as enough. It's always Jesus plus this and plus that is going to equal freedom or salvation in your life. And we know that it's Jesus plus nothing equals those things. And so what was happening when Paul was said, hey, watch out for those dogs, for those mutilators of the flesh, for those people that do evil. What he's referring to is he's referring to a group of people named the Judaizers. And they were rolling into churches after Paul would go there and win people to Christ and get them involved in the local church. And he would leave. These guys would roll in and they would go, hey, listen, you found Jesus. That's awesome. But you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do this and you need to do that. And you need to follow the 619 Pharisaical laws that we've implemented. And not only on top of that, hey, guys, listen, I've got something really, really special for the men here. Listen, if you want to follow Jesus and you want to be saved, listen, accept Jesus into your heart. Follow all these rules. And by the way, we need to circumcise you. To which every dude's like, peace out, Jesus. Had enough of that. I was cool with some rules, but we're not cutting anything off. And Paul is saying, hey, you're mutilators of the flesh. Hey, like you need to watch out for people that are putting all these things on you. Because there is this constant tension in our society, and it's in all of us as individuals, between this idea of an internal transformation and the idea of, man, we've got to have all these external forces to control our sinful behavior. Like, I got to implement all these external things to try to make sure that I don't sin. And a lot of people get in this mentality that Jesus was about behavior modification for our life. And let me just tell you something. Jesus was never about modifying your behavior. He was never intentionally trying to modify your behavior. What he was always after was transforming your heart. He knew that the only way your behavior would ever be modified is if your heart was transformed, not the other way around. You could never modify your behavior enough to transform your heart because it doesn't work that way. It's like dieting. Some of y'all have gone on some diets. I've gone on some diets. The one thing that I've learned is that if I go on a diet, what I'm doing is I am modifying my behavior. I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm following a regimen. And what happens is I get to the conclusion of my diet and I've achieved the weight loss that I want. And as soon as I stop dieting, what happens? I gain all that weight back plus a few friends called pounds. Why? Because all I did was modify my behavior. And I can only modify my behavior for so long before I revert back. But if I would have transformed my heart, if I would have changed my lifestyle, if that would have been a thing that happened inside of me where I needed to go, you know what? I need to make some life transformation happen. Like, I need some things to happen inside of me that dictate that my lifestyle is going to be different. This isn't just for a set period of time. This is forever. And Paul goes on in verse 3 and it says, it is for we the circumcision who worship by the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus and who put no confidence in the flesh. He says, listen, this isn't an external thing. You don't need to get stuff cut off because there's a circumcision that's happening in your life. It's called a circumcision of your heart. That's what Jesus is after. That's what he wants to do. And see, salvation is an addition and subtraction thing. It's a substitution thing. That's what salvation is all about. Jesus didn't add something or subtract something for your life. Man, he came and substituted on the cross the penalty of death that we all deserved. And he said, man, now you can have life and have it more abundantly. And you can't put your confidence like you didn't do any of that. Jesus did all that. You can't put any confidence in your flesh to accomplish that because Jesus accomplished that. So make sure that you realize that don't get caught up in all the rules and regulations that other people are trying to put on you because it's about a heart transformation that Jesus is trying to have in your life. Then Paul says, watch out for the substitute. And what I mean by that is the enemy will always come into your life and tell you that if you get this, then you'll be happy. Like if you just achieve this or have this relationship, then you'll be happy. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to substitute something that's not real for the actual real. He's going, listen, if you get this relationship, then you'll achieve happiness. But we all know that no relationship is going to bring us happiness in life. Because happiness is based on happenings. And as soon as something happens in that relationship, that happiness is gone. But that's his goal, is he's trying to sell you stuff that doesn't bring lasting joy to your life. And Paul talks to this very thing in verse 4. He says, if anyone else thinks he has reason to put confidence in the flesh, he's going, listen, I know what it's like to try to substitute. I've been substituting. Let me tell you what I've achieved in my life. He goes, I have more, circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, in regards to the law of Pharisee. As for zeal, persecuting the church. As for legalistic righteousness, dude, I'm faultless. He's going, man, I've done everything that's out there under the sun, thinking that it will bring me joy. And what I found out is that none of those things do. They're empty. And so the enemy, he comes around and says, listen, if you could just live in that neighborhood, then you'd be happy. Listen, if you could just achieve this status at your job, then you'd be happy. Listen, if you were in a relationship with that group of people, if you were in that social status, you would be happy. And he tries to substitute those things for true joy in our life. And that's why Jesus told us in Luke chapter 12, he says, watch out. What he says is, he says, watch out. It says, be on guard for all kinds of greed. Be on guard for all kinds of things that you think that you can grab hold of that are going to bring meaning and significance to your life. And trying to acquire more and more of those things, because the thing about those things is it always requires you to get more. No matter how much you get, then when will you be? It's like the person that said, how much money is enough? Just a little bit more. How much status is enough? Just a little bit more. How much love is enough? Just a little bit more. It's always going to be more, and this is greed that happens inside of us. He says a man's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. He's not about achieving things. So the question is how do we maintain our joy then? Like, how do we maintain our joy with all these things trying to rob it from us? And Paul gives us some simple things to do. The first one is this, is keep on knowing. Number one, keep on knowing. Verse 8, he says, what is more, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things, and I consider them rubbish that I may gain Christ. He says, man, it's all about knowing Christ. And that word knowing, if you were to look up that word, that is the same word that if you were to go back to Genesis, where Adam and Eve have this intimate moment where they become a husband and wife, it says that Adam knew Eve. It was this intimate relationship. That same word knowing that's there with Adam and Eve is the same word that Paul uses right here. He's saying that there has got to be this intimacy with God where you have got to truly know God, where you're having this relationship with him that isn't based on, hey, I have a whole bunch of information about God, like I've done a lot of studying on God, but you actually know God. That there's something more substantial to it than just having the information. In fact, in verse 10, he says, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings and becoming like him to death. Becoming like him in his death. And what Paul is saying is, he's saying, man, there is so much depth to this relationship with God. Like, I'm going to be in this process of knowing God for the rest of my life. For the rest of all of my days, I'm going to be pursuing knowing Christ. I'm going to be pursuing having this relationship with God. And the moment I stop pursuing knowing Christ, like the moment I stop having that intimacy in the relationship, is the moment that my joy is going to start to leak out. Because you can't know somebody without staying in connection with them. And we know that this is true. If I never talk to Shayla again, as much as I know Shayla, there would start to be some distance in our relationship. Like we would be lacking some things. And Paul was saying, listen, you got to continue to pursue God. You got to spend time with God. You need to get into his word and figure out who he is and what his character is like and listen for his voice. And as you distinguish his voice and he's going to respond to you and you're going to respond to him. Like there's this knowing that has to happen. And once we get that, man, we got to keep on going after it. Man, we got to keep on knowing Christ. He says, as we keep on knowing God, then number two, we got to don't stop growing. So we got to keep on knowing, and we got to continue growing in our relationship with God, because the thing that is going to bring you the greatest joy in your life is going to be growth. There's a statement that's out there that I think is so true. It says, the two most important days in your life is the day you're born and the day you figure out why. The reason why I think that's so significant is because I believe that God has got a purpose and a plan for every single one of our lives. And we've got to keep on growing to pursue that purpose and plan that he has for our life. And Paul refers to this in verse 12. He says, not that I've already obtained all this or I've already been made perfect. He's saying, listen, I don't got all of this figured out. Like, I'm still knowing God. I'm still figuring out this relationship thing. And he goes, I'm still growing as well. He goes, I press on to take hold of that for which Christ has taken hold of me. And he's saying that thing is my purpose. I don't even have that exactly all figured out right now, but I'm trying to grab for it, man. I'm reaching for that. I'm pursuing that. I keep on growing in my life. He goes, brothers, I don't consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind me and straining towards what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. And Paul right here reveals a secret to joy, and it's called purpose. He says, man, the secret to having joy in life is discovering your purpose. And I want to give you a huge revelation for your life. By raise of hands, how many of y'all have problems? How many people have problems? Okay. The majority of us. Welcome to the club. We're all a part of it. Club problem. Okay, so a lot of us, we want our problems to go away. That's the reality. Most of us, like, one of the reasons a lot of us turn to God is because God hopefully can solve our problems. God can be the solution to our problems, and God is the solution to your problems. But a lot of us see our problems as a terrible thing. In fact, Jesus told us, in this world you will have trouble, but take courage, I've overcome the world. So he says, listen, you're going to have problems. And problems, a lot of times we look at them as a negative thing, but problems aren't a bad thing. Problems are actually one of the best things that can ever happen to your life. And some of you are like, say what? Say what, TJ? You're not reading what I'm reading. Problems ain't good. Like, no. Let me tell you something. Problems can be one of the best things that happen in your life, because in the middle of the problem is a what? There's a solution. And if you got a problem, God has probably put the answer, the solution to that problem inside of you. And see, what God is trying to do is he's trying to get you to realize that you're the solution to a problem, and the solution to the problem is your purpose. And the same problem that you're facing right now, I guarantee you there's a whole bunch of other jokers out there that are facing the same thing. And the purpose that he's given you is to help other people solve their problems. And as you go out there and you start to solve some other people's problems, you're going to find the most fulfillment. You're going to find the most joy, not in acquiring things, but in helping people. He says, you know what you need to do? You need to keep on growing. Not that you've already attained it, because you know what? As you find the solution to that problem, you're going to have another problem. And in that problem, you're going to find some more purpose, because all of a sudden, you've got a reason to live. If there weren't no problems, there's no reason for you to be here. Right now, the problem is sin. He's trying to help you eradicate that from your life so that you can go help somebody else eradicate that, and that's through the blood of Jesus Christ. So you can go and take that. You got the solution to everybody's problem. And so he's saying, man, your purpose is revealed in the problems that you have. So when a problem arises, you should be like, heck yeah, Jesus, I'm on this. That's freaking awesome. I got a problem, which means I'm about to find my purpose. Man, I'm preaching way better than y'all are responding. I'm just telling you that right now. I'm about to blow a blood vessel in my right eye right now. I don't know if that's good, but I'm enjoying it. And so James, the brother of Jesus, and this is what he says. And honestly, I've hated this verse for so long. And you'll probably hate it too. It's just one of those verses. He says, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds. How many of y'all are, seriously, when a problem comes up, you're excited? That's what I thought. None of us, right? But he's saying, listen, when you understand that your problem is about to reveal your purpose, then it's easy to get some joy in that moment. So you gotta keep on growing. You gotta realize, man, God is about to show up in a big way, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work. He's saying, like, listen, you got to keep on growing until you're finished, until you're dead. That's the finished work right there. When you die, you're finished. Okay, that's the finished work. Until then, you need to keep on growing. Don't stop growing so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. He says, man, we got to keep on knowing and we got to keep on growing. And number 3, you got to know where you're going. You got to know where the destination is. And we talked about this the first week that, man, you know, if you know Christ, then earth is not all you've got. But if you don't know Christ, you know what? You need this life to work out. You need everything to have a nice, pretty bow and just wrap up and be perfect, because all of your hope is right here. Like, you need relationship. You need the job to be perfect. You need to have that home, because that's your hope. But if you know Christ, you know that this earth doesn't have to work out, because you're just passing through. This is like the Atlanta terminal for Delta for you. Like, you're just waiting for the next flight to take you someplace else. But I'm going to do the best I can while I'm sitting there in gate B39. I'm going to live it up. Paul says in verse 20, but our citizenship is in heaven. For all those that know Jesus, man. See, we're in this world, but we're not of this world. We're just passing through. It says, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ. See, what Paul is saying is listen, you can't be defeated when the hope of heaven is in your heart. Your joy can't be stolen, because joy isn't found here on this earth. It's found in a relationship with God. Can't be taken away. Saying, man, there's nothing that's too big of a problem that could ever take away Paul's joy. That's why even imprisoned, waiting execution, man, he was still singing. He was still praising God. He was still encouraging other people. Why? Because this wasn't his home. He was just passing through. 1 Peter says this, he's given us a new birth into a living hope. This isn't some dead religious hope. This is a living hope. Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. And into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you. See, when we put our hope in things here, you know what the problem with things here is? That everything here on this earth has an expiration date. It spoils, it fades, and it perishes away. Nothing lasts forever on this earth. But he says you can have something that will last forever, that is everlasting, and that's a relationship with Jesus. And that relationship with Jesus will bring you more significance, more purpose, more joy than anything you could experience here. And it's through his resurrection. It's through his death and his resurrection. It's through the fact that he gave it all so that you could have it all. The question is today, are you going to choose to continue to grab hold of the substitutes that are out there? Or are you going to grab onto the real thing?
Thank you for checking out Coastal Community Church. We hope that you receive hope and encouragement through this week's message. If this ministry has impacted your life in any way, please share your story at mystory@coastalcommunity.tv. We hope you enjoy the service.